very interesting kind of challenge, right? Equal parts exciting, but equal parts just frustrating as you cannot believe. Like some of the things you have to hear, and then you have to wonder, these companies are at the spear, like the tip of the spear of technology, and like they're saying such, it kind of boggles your mind, but
Hi, Prash.
Hey guys.
How's it going?
Hi Arjun. Good man, good. How
Are
are you doing?
Are you happy that Arsenal is actually buying players this season?
Yeah, I'll never count it as bought until it's bought, because Chelsea is always on the horizon trying to outbid us and make a team of two squads of forwards for some reason.
So yeah, they're proper hustlers, dude. Speaking of hustlers, I think we have the hustler in the space with us, Arjun. Thank you for joining us at the Normies podcast. Arjun, for those of you who don't know, from the Polygon fame, is now leading ecosystem at Mantle. Is it Mantle or BitDAO? Mainly for Mantle, right?
So the chain is called Mantle, but we're a BitDAO incubated project. So yeah.
Nice. So I think the first time I spoke to Arjun was in 2019. I think for that Telangana blockchain accelerator thing that we were doing. You had come on one of those panels, and I was like, man, Polygon has grown up in their team right now, because everybody else in that team was like, they were like us, right? Like figuring things out. The t-shirt and track pant crew in a world of suits. And then here you were kind of sat right bang in the middle, who had the vibe, but still got along with all of us. So since then, it's been a pleasure knowing you, Arjun. This would be a really nice recounting of what you're currently doing and how that journey from the corporate world to Web3 has been. Prash, when did you first meet Arjun?
Actually, I can't remember when I first met Arjun. It's just been like, it's last 2 years has been a breeze. And like, if I think of like some of the top personalities who have made so much significant change in what they were working in, I think Arjun comes pretty top on the mind, right? I like to think of him more as a machine than a man, given how he's transformed, Polygon in his previous role, and how he's kind of like put impetus to BD as something that needs to be focused on within the ecosystem.
Yeah, Arjun, do you know you are the reason that all the VCs are like, hey, who's your BD guy? Who's going to do Polygon like BD for your team?
Thank you guys for your. First thing, thank you for your kind words, man. Like it's I'm happy things worked out well, and obviously there's a lot of effort put in there, and a lot of people contributed to the cause as well. But that being said, again, thank you guys for having me. I think Prashant, if I'm not wrong, so we've been on multiple calls, but I think I met him in Bangalore. When
I know when you guys met. It was in that room where
it was in that room.
Yeah, of course.
I was actually trying to get there without saying the room, but okay. Like it was.
Let's not go further.
It was some fancy conversations in that room.
That room, but that room is like every crypto bros, meetup. It's like one room, and then like some 15 people crammed in, all talking about what they're building and what next to be excited about and all that. Yeah, that
kind of also shows you, right? Kind of also shows you, right? Like over such a short period of time, like the builder network in India is become crazy, man. Like I was like, and everybody's like building top tier stuff. Like I remember when I first joined and we used to do hackathons, like we would not get that high quality projects, and like I used to sometimes wonder, like what can we do, what can change. But now, like go to ETH India, if you meet some of the builders from India, like seriously cutting edge stuff is being built, some of the best minds are there. So I think that's something which I'm something really happy about and proud about, that finally the talent in India is waking up. Yeah, I saw that, right? Like literally, like Vitalik Corner to like all the way to like now we will build like options, decentralized option vaults. I'm like, oh, okay, wow. Tell me more. Like, so it's like a completely like different scene now. So super
Arjun,
excited
back
to
in,
yeah.
I think 2 weeks ago, we were talking to Muskan from Polygon, and she was
Ah,
saying that back in the day when she had just joined, they used to literally go on Zoom calls and say like, "Please build on my chain," like, "Please do this." Was it
bro,
the same for you when it came to BD when you were trying to crack
it
these
was the
BD?
same. It was the same, man. There was a lot of like, a lot of folded hands approach towards, I mean, I think during the initial days it was interesting, right? Because see, there was product market fit, I would say,
Yeah.
right? So with respect to Polygon, like, and what was happening on Ethereum at the time with gas fees and all of that, so there was product market fit. However, like the other problems was that number one, like we didn't have any money, like
Hmm.
nada, right? When it came for like anything, like, so that was a problem, balancing budgets. Number two was also the fact that, I would say that, today, like now Polygon, of course, is a big company and, there's a level of respect for Indian founders. I think we saw that in ETH India when every fund you can name was like there, trying to scout. But it wasn't like this, when the mainnet went live. There was a stigma, like, I could kind of feel that sometimes in conversations when I would talk to projects. It's like, oh, interesting, like, where you guys based? I'm like, oh, we're based in Bangalore. And then like, oh, and then, like the tone would change. So, it was tough too. It was really tough. It was tough to fight through that time. And like I said, limited resources. Even every time I hired someone, I had to think like 5 times before, can we afford it? What would happen? What would be the responsibilities? How can we do? So I think the initial days were like, yeah, really crazy. And I think, you know, a big part of, I think, Polygon success also was a bottoms up sort of way of building the ecosystem, right? So sort of like, as to see these top tier protocols at the time. So at the time, like Flow was a $40 billion protocol, Polkadot was a $40 billion protocol, so like big protocols, right? And then these guys would hire like really like, tier one folks, right? And we were like a ragtag bunch of people, who
Hmm.
were cobbled together from different parts of India, but like, tier one kind of folks. And then, like you would see big logos sometimes work with these guys, especially with NBA Top Shots, Flow having that partnership
Yeah.
at the time. But for us, like, we just simply didn't have the wherewithal to do those kind of things. So it started very bottoms up. And I think that culture really helped a lot because what that meant is that everybody in the team, founders included, were very close to the ground, right? And that meant like talking to the smallest to the most influential builder, right? And I've realized in Web3, especially compared to Web2, right? So Web2 doesn't change too much for like extended periods of time. Like, cloud computing now has seen 15 years of like growth, right? All the way from 2010 to now. And what happens is that, people eventually start like, interacting with ground level companies, then they move up in the hierarchy, etc. And even when they move up and they reach like VP, SPV level, not much has changed,
Hmm.
right? In Web3, what happens is that it's so fast. Change happens so quickly that if you're not the kind of person who's continuously close to the ground, you are going to miss.
So yeah, so being close to the ground and being humble about what we did, talking to every builder, whether small or big, and I remember like there was like a good 6 month period where I would bang out like 14, 16 calls a day, just cleaning information, right? What's happening, what are people building, what are people thinking, and that kind of culture I think really culminated in the kind of success which we saw, especially during the first year, right, where we were so close to the ground and essentially also grounded, as people, like all from humble backgrounds, not like some hotshot people at all. And what that meant is that, like, the team kind of imbibed that culture, that
Yeah.
this is how we should operate, right? And it turned out that that is exactly how Web3 should operate.
I love that.
Right. So I think what we started doing mostly out of desperation turned out to be in some
Ethos.
sense, like the ethos of how it should
Yeah.
be, right? And now when I look back, I realize that that's why, because even today, like for me, I always ensure that I stay as close to the ground as possible so that I'm continuously aware of what's happening, and then whatever course correction we need to do, whether it comes to technology or business or partnerships, that can be done on a dime. So in some sense, the way you operate your business has to, especially in Web3, has to mirror how Web3 operates or how the Web3
Yep.
markets operate.
Yep.
And if you do that, then like, so anyway, like, I mean, this Gyan aside, I think I went on the wrong track here. But yeah, initial days were fun. Like,
No, no, that's
what
super interesting. And also, we could hear the pain that turned into like so much satisfaction for you guys over a period of time because of the effort you had to put in, right? And not a lot of people would have believed in themselves and had the conviction to kind of put in this effort as you guys did, right? So which is why you guys are reaping the benefits of that today.
I know, definitely. I think I would dare say that the transformation from pain to satisfaction took like a little longer than, it should have. Like, then I would have liked, like, the whole lot of pain before any sort of sense of satisfaction. So it was like really long period. But yeah, I mean, just grinding it out, following the basics, being humble, trying to help as many people as we can with whatever meager resources we had, turned out, turned into like this sort of movement where, we had very loyal like community members, right? Because they could feel what we were doing. They, talk to us regularly, and that's how it is. And people want to associate themselves with, this kind of a cause. And I think, culturally compared to then other blockchains, like we ended up having a very unique kind of culture. And then, the hiring practices for me, like when I built out the initial team, mirrored this kind of thinking. Like I always wanted people who were very close to the ground and who had that kind of mindset. And that became my blueprint as well. When I saw the success, I was like, okay, this is how you should be a hiring strategy. And then sort of started scouting and finding those kind of people. So that's why, like, I've become a believer in this, that ultimately the way your business or your company runs has to mirror the market, right? And that has to, the market is a blueprint in some sense. So
those are really valuable things for anyone who's listening to us. But Arjun, let's talk about you, right? Manipal, ISB, Infosys, Oracle, Tech Mahindra, and then Polygon, right? Like,
right.
how does that happen? And the stuff that you've done at Polygon is crazy, right? Like I was just kind of reading a little bit about all the things that you did. I think Polygon's got 60,000 apps right now, millions of weekly users. You built a phenomenal team, market cap kind of grew crazy. That these sort of metrics makes me believe that you have done that transition very well, right? But what was the transition itself like? What was
for me?
Yeah.
So, so to start with, obviously undergrad was a very special time, like, and Manipal in some sense is a very special place, in equal parts, like fun, equal parts reviled also. Like, you tell parents you're from Manipal, they're like, oh, drugs karta hoga. Like, that's like, that is a, like, like literal, like,
I have 3 Manipal guys in my team.
So where I'm coming from. Right? So this was like what people thought culturally. You know, वो शराब पीते हैं, like, drugs करते हैं पूरे दिन, like, no motivation, nothing. And I would say it wasn't as black and white, but yeah, it was great. I wouldn't say all of it is like, completely off the tangent. It was just like any other engineering college. So it was a fun time. I think what was special about Manipal and how it shaped, like, if I would look back and maybe talk about how it shaped thinking, is that, see, it's one city, right, where there are like 6 or 7 colleges, right? So there's an engineering college, there's a medical college, Kasturba Medical College, then there's a, Manipal Institute of Communications, Manipal Institute of Management, then there's Tapmi Management College. So they're like, it's the entire city essentially is like 80, 85, 90% students, right? So I remember at our time, they were like, I think 40,000 students and maybe 2,000 like localites, like literally like very, very, very small. So everybody is a student, right? So you can literally go and talk to anybody. Right. And that becomes a habit, right? So you go to your mess, you go to anywhere, like you always talking to people. Right. And that kind of became the culture there. Secondly, the interesting thing is that there is no college campus per se. The city is the campus. So when they tell you don't leave campus, they say don't leave the city. Right. So it's like that, So and I would say compared to maybe some of the other colleges, there is a large amount of freedom. Right, which at least at the time we had. Like, I don't know what it is these days. I haven't been to Manipal for a while, but like at the time there was a huge amount of freedom, right? And what that also kind of helped people develop an independent sense of thinking, right? Because you had to do things yourself. There wasn't like a regimen you had to follow, like do this, do that, do that. It wasn't like that. So it kind of, you kind of start to then like do what you want to do, right? And then it kind of helps you develop your personality, right? And then it worked out really well for like many people, many of us who, maybe weren't as extroverted, etc., or like the kind. But for many it didn't also. I think that freedom is a double-edged sword. A lot of people misused it and maybe were not able to really enjoy the Manipal experience as much. But I mean, that was a fun time. Some of the best friends, like some of the more like best trips, like now when I take trips versus the trips then, like, the best trips I've done, like the best Goa trips or whatever trips I've done, is when I had literally like $1,000 in my pocket. That's it. Like no money, nothing. Like, $500 is our budget. Like that. Those were the best of the best trips. Now when I go, it's somehow not fun. That or as much fun. So very fondly remember that time. Then, of course, college placements, joined Infosys. Now, I graduated in 2009. 2008 was a financial crash. So suddenly placements, etc., dried up. So I tried to do the best of what I could get. So I think, Raghu, were you saying something?
One sec, my dog's gone crazy. No,
Like, मुझे भी मणिपाल जाना है. No, I'm kidding.
Manipal hasn't changed, by the way. It's exactly the
Oh,
same.
it
We
hasn't?
went recently.
How about that? So
Yeah.
that's a
No,
good
but
thing.
my question was, with all this freedom, you joined like a regimented corporate structure, and then how did that lead you to Polygon?
Man, it was terrible, man. Suddenly, like, I joined this super structured company, and Infosys has this like strange culture also, right? You have to wear a tie and all. Like, I don't know if they have it now, but at the time it was strange. Like, you have to wear a tie and all. So, at some point I asked, like, some senior, like, people, so, like, why do you have to wear a tie? Like, where did this come from? Like, this KPI thing. Yeah, it was a hardcore KPI. If you didn't wear the tie, there was like some fine.
Oh man, I didn't know this. It's crazy.
Yeah, so I went and spoke to some like senior, director level folks. We got a chance to meet in one of the, sort of review sessions and all. I asked him, sir, like, what's the deal? He's like, actually, one of the founders apparently, way back in the day, like it's again 90s, 80s or something, right? They went to the US to pitch like some US client and they weren't wearing a tie, right? And apparently, like, whatever the client gave them stick for it, right? You come for a meeting, you're not even wearing a tie. So then the founders decided everybody's going to wear it. So, sir, what if people don't want to wear a tie? Like, find them. Like, everybody wears a tie. This is the culture now. You got like 1 lakh people wearing ties every day in the morning. And you forgot your tie, you go back home, so you don't get fined. Like, so you wear the tie and come. So, like, it was kind of crazy, right? And I went through the training, like, part where, I went to the Mysore campus and it was a fun experience. The campus is beautiful. It was I would dare say, like, good training in some sense, like, especially, but I think I'll tell you why the training was really good at Infosys, right? So it wasn't the coding and the tech part, right? It came from a computer science background. It was power course. But they, like, because the economy was so bad, they didn't want us to immediately join like Infosys, right? So our training got extended by like some 2-3 months, right? Now these guys are wondering, what do we teach these guys? Everything is over. Like, all the coding C++ is done. So we went through this 2.5-month period of just soft skills training, right? Which is how to communicate, how to be culturally more, like, how do you say, respectful, like how to understand cultures and even basic things like, like etiquettes, writing emails. And in my opinion, that training was the best training I've ever received in my life. Like, you'd be shocked at people who come from even B schools and don't know how to write straight emails, whether it's for job applications or for, business development or whatever have you. But, at a very young age, right out of college, we got that. Mostly out of desperation because Infosys didn't know how to put us in billable roles. So they were like, कहाँ पे डाले क्या करे चलो इनको email सिखाओ, like, trainer बुलाओ सिखाओ, like, and best training, honestly, like, those skills I have kept with me throughout my entire like career. And I later realized, what a big, like, I thought, obviously, I mean, you know how to write an email, right? But no, it somehow was a rare skill as I started moving the corporate ladder. So this is the Infosys experience. Went there, did the, typical IT services job. Then I kind of at some point realized कि देखो मैं ना कोडर नहीं हूँ, ठीक है? मैं वो क्रैक लेवल कोडर नहीं होते, हैकर टाइप रात को बैठा ऐसे वेबसाइट में क्रैक निकाल, व्हाटएवर, आई एम नॉट दैट गाय, ठीक है? Like, वो नहीं आ रहा है मेरे को. And I could like code and I had taken part in some computer science competitions and all, लेकिन वो वाला, like, I realized वो passion नहीं है, ठीक है? अगर मेरे को एक्स्ट्रा टाइम मिलेगा मैं कोडिंग नहीं करूंगा, मैं जाके बियर पीऊंगा, राइट? वाज प्रीटी क्लियर, सो आई रियलाइज्ड कि भाई ये तो बिल्कुल ही लाइक समझ नहीं आ रहा है. So then I thought, okay, let's go to sales and business development side of technology itself, right? I understand tech, I'm from that background. चलो, like, tech बनाना नहीं आ रहा, बेचना try करते हैं. So then I went to Oracle. We went through this extended, like, so I was there. I was a business development consultant over there, and the idea was to, Oracle, obviously big company, huge stack, so we had to like sort of sell that technology primarily into the US market. So there was like a lot of night shift and doing that. But that was very interesting because, again, like, as stars would align, I went through this very extensive Oracle training program, right? Where they, and I don't know if it's still there again, like, but Oracle at the time when I joined, right, used to have these very extensive trainings. Like every quarter, there used to be like this proper training, none of this crap, right? You go and fill up some like questionnaire and, multiple choice. It wasn't like that. Like, there was like proper hardcore training where they would call sales experts, business development experts, other people. Also, the best part I felt about the team which I joined had like, pretty seasoned salespeople, right? So I learned a lot from them about technology, about sales, relationships, and those kind of things. All the trainings also, and somehow I again got the right training at the right time. where, we got some really master trainers who made me really think about, value of technology, right? Like when you're building technology, like as an engineer, most of the times you're not even thinking about what the user wants, right? You're just building it because it's fun, for the sake of it, or it solves a problem. Here, I started thinking about those kind of problems. Like ultimately, the technology is for the user, right? It has to be some clear value accrual, revenue accrual somewhere. So how does this work? How does, like, and from technology sales, I kind of began to understand more and more about the tech business. Like now that I understood more about the user and where the revenue was coming from, the question has to be asked, okay, so today we are getting this revenue, but what is the revenue on the horizon, right? Like, what is the customer thinking? So I got into this habit of always asking, like, all the customers and all the people we used to talk to, what's next? Like, what are you guys building? And then from there, try to understand, if this company is moving in this direction, this is what they will need. Like, I started watching, like, company share prices. I started reading about, like their sort of media interviews and seeing what their senior executives are talking about. And this kind of habit again became like something which would again pay me tenfold in my career, of just having this habit of just keeping track of what's happening in the market, right? In some sense, almost to the point, where it became obsessive in some nature, where I would come into office maybe early and spend like 1.5 hours just doing this, just keeping a track of what's happening, right? So that I can get a sense of which way the money is moving, which way people are thinking, which way technology is moving. So again, like stars aligned, just like at Infosys, where I learned how to write like emails and stuff like this early. Here, sales training came at just the right time. And I got a sense. And then of course, I took a bit of a detour. Like, we started a business. It was me and my dad. We started this water purification business. I wanted to, try something like this, and go from technology sales to like proper brick and mortar dhanda kind of business. That too in Delhi, right? War bhi mushkil market hai, right? It's a totally like, not fun experience, I would say. But I think again, it taught me like some like amazing skills, like, just going and talking to Marwadi businessmen, and trying to convince them. Like, abhi tak to different tha, right? North America mein, hey, like, what are you guys building? Ye wo. Yahan bilkul hi alag experience, bhai. Like, you go to some sweet shop, guy sitting there chewing tobacco, right? Entirely different kind of like, selling and experience, like totally. And then I learned this phrase, which is Delhi mein jo hota hai na, dekho beta, like so you tell them, dekho beta, ye sab theek hai, lekin, like, dekho beta, like aisa. So it became like that, and I did that business because at the time, like Kent was just scaling, right? So I was thinking, like, this RO water purifier, how am I going to explain this to people? Hema Malini. Hema Malini was there on TV every single day in every single serial. Whenever, you could, before you could catch a breath, she's there explaining, RO ka pani sabse, and like, and then her daughters were in on the act. So then, it became like, so I was like, wow, this is great. Like Kent is explaining to everybody how RO works. Now I just need to have like a cheaper product, right? And maybe better services or something. And we were able to make, get distribution, make some money. Ultimately, this money was used to pay for my B school after, like, sort of and this experience was interesting. I learned again a lot. I also learned some very valuable business lessons, because when you are on the hook for running the business and paying the bills, it's an entirely different experience.
Yeah.
Right. There's no backup here. You have to pay your employees. You have to make money. And then I also realized most interesting things about business, about scale, about how for Kent it made money to spend a lot on advertisements, because then the value accrual over a period of time would kind of more than pay back. Right. For that kind of investment, right? I had a cheaper, like I remember when Ken started, they were 18-20,000, and I was like, my product was 10,000, right? Over a period of time, wo 20-18 ho gaya, फिर वो 16 ho gaya, फिर वो 14 ho gaya. Then with some coupon codes, whatever, it became 12, and then suddenly I realized market, like, sort of advantages evaporated, like within like couple of years, and I should have seen this coming. So you kind of realize how economies at scale work, how big businesses plan market entry, right? So my learning was not कि यार ये नहीं हुआ, and and like मैं तंबाकू नहीं खाता इसलिए मैं close नहीं कर पाया, like whatever, like that wasn't my learning. My learning was यार अगर आपके पास capital है और आपको धंधा चलाना है, right, business, like how you in a very systematic way approach the market. First you educate the people, like literally, and in this case it was shoved down people's throats everywhere, like cricket match, but it didn't matter, like you couldn't escape this. Like, you teach people ki RO ka pani shudha hai, RO ka pani shudha hai, RO ka pani shudha hai. And then, people make that association, at some point, like RO ka pani shudha hai, like, and then, right, and so first you do that, you educate the public, right? Then you start killing everybody in the market by bringing the cost down, right? So all these other small players, etc., sabka business ban, right? And then you have commanding market position. Now you can continue to again maybe raise prices or do whatever, like, and they've come up with this interesting service program approach where, they sort of charge more people and make revenue there. So it was a very interesting learning. So after this failure of our business where, we scaled and then we never could capitalize on that advantage, this was like a very interesting learning of how you approach market, how you have to, when you come up with a completely new product, which people don't even know about, right? And this is the learning which I realized in Web3, because Web3 is all about education first. Like most of the people don't understand this, right? And education is so important. And that's why these lessons came into play, because I've seen this before, not in technology, but in an entirely different business scheme, where something new had to come into market and you have to educate people. Like, kya hai? Like, what are the advantages? Like, how? So this is that experience. Then I realized business was failing. Also, very interesting experiences happened where I would go to government offices, and try to explain to them. Entirely different. Like, you sit there, then you're waiting, chai pila rahe and all that, entirely different kind of conversation. Then again, dekho beta, yes, entirely different kind of daily conversation. Like, sort of, but several times when I used to go to these government offices, I remember like there were a couple of people amongst the management over there who became my friends, and they used to ask me, "Bete, aap kya kar rahe ho?" Like, ab ye business kar rahe ho, like, you are not meant for this. You should, aapko, like, in their, like, their way of explaining was, tumhe na AC office mein baithna chahiye. Like, I was like, acha, like, office mein to AC tha nahi. Like, we used to all of that. So, and this happened a couple of times and all, and then the business wasn't doing well. So I said, okay, you know what? Let's now try to completely like reset, right? Fresh start, like, and India में आपको पता है fresh start का formula क्या है? MBA कर लो. Very simple. Like, when in doubt, MBA कर लो. Like, simple है. देखो Shark Tank में भी वो सारे sharks ने ऐसा किया है. कोई ऐसी कोई नई चीज नहीं है. So this is like cultural. So as a, so then I was like, okay, then I wrote the exams. Then I, got through like ISB. Then I, went to ISB. Now this 1 year was also a very interesting experience, because ISB ka hiring culture, I mean, sort of like student culture, thoda alag hai. People come with a lot of experience.
Yeah.
Right. And people are from all walks of life. So they pride themselves on this diversity. So what that meant is, in the class, you got equal parts like engineers, equal parts like people from the army. There were some like people from merchant navy, somebody from like social like services back, like, that kind of background, who's worked in like charities and stuff. There were people who were chefs. There were people who from like so it was a very like, interesting mix of people together in one place at one time, right? And then what you do is you take all of these people and then you subject them to extreme academic pleasure, acute sleep deprivation, right? Over a period of 1 year, right? And then what happens is you end up becoming like really good pals with all of these guys, right? And you sort of like, also, I think, when you go through that MBA experience, right? It's a 1 year course. So 2 years are compressed to 1 year, right? So it's not as if the credits are any less or the studying is any less. It's the same. It's just that it's a little more hardcore. And what that means is that, under duress, under pressure and all of this, you kind of understand how you react also. Like, one most important thing which I learned in this 1 year was so much from my peers and the education as well, and from the professors, but more about myself, that under extreme level of duress, pressure, how do I react? Right? Like, what is the worst side of me? Right. And then once you learn that about yourself, then, you kind of also then try to, you're able to manage yourself a little better under. And you have to like 16-18 hour days, you barely sleeping, barely have time to eat, assignments are there, like you would get assignment at like 8 p.m. in the night, you have to submit it like 4 a.m. by 4 a.m. in the morning, completely new subject, like no idea what's going on, right? And dare you cheat, because if in ISB it was, at least during my year, I don't know if that system has also changed now, but it was like if you're caught cheating, immediately thrown out of the college,
Right.
like they don't even do any sort of fine, whatever, it's just straight away you're kicked out. So everybody was super scared that, so nobody, you couldn't collude, you couldn't do these things. So it was like extreme, right? And the problem is that everybody was so academically bright that, dude, the cutoff marks were insane, man. I remember like there was this time I got 87 out of 100 in, what is it, some account, some subject, I got 87 out of 100. The grade was B. I'm like, what? How can the grade be B? Then I realized that everybody else had killed it to such a point where A plus was 97 above.
Wow.
A was from 90 to 97, 90 के below B. Right, like, कुछ ऐसे बीच में थोड़ा एक B plus का भी slide था. मैं बोला, यार, ये what is happening, man? Like, this is crazy. And then because everybody is like, intelligent, bright, those kind of people. And so this is also like more interesting, where, what I learned is that you have to know, first of all, you have to be very clear on your strengths and weaknesses. I think weaknesses become very clear in this kind of an environment. What are you good at and what you're not good at? Because now people around you everybody's really good at something. And then you have to at some point accept that main ye nahi kar sakta. Like this is not my best skill. Right. And it becomes evidently very apparent, like not just in the study groups, but on the question paper answer also, when you get those grades. So that becomes very clear what your weaknesses are, what your strengths are. The second most important thing is you learn the power of collaboration, because if you don't collaborate in this environment, you will fail. So whether you like your team or not, you don't like your study group, it doesn't matter. Right. You don't gel with them, you can't hang out with them, doesn't matter. You need to find a way to work together. Otherwise, you're going to fail. So there was certain, like, after I graduated and I had some time to decompress, I remember after ISB, right, I went home, and this is literally the first night after ISB. I went home, I arrived in Delhi, and, went to my room, and, I was sleeping at night, right? So out of habit, I was putting the alarm, and, Android, when you put the alarm, it tells you how many hours are left, right?
Yeah.
Before you wake up. So I put the alarm, it was like 7 hours. I was like, oh my God, 7 hours of sleep. How is this possible? Like, I started getting stressed out over that only. मैं 7 घंटे कैसे सोऊंगा? Like, and because that number always used to be like 4, 3.5, 2.5, 4.5, like, so completely, like, but when I decompressed, I began to understand the science of why that system was designed that way. And it forced you to develop certain skills, get along with people, whether you like them or not. And when you're with a bunch of people, you focus on the objective and the end goal versus, do I like these people or not? You develop that kind of thinking. Yeah, people are around me, goal has to be achieved. What is the goal? And let's break that down. What do we need to do? And then you do it together. And if you get along with the people in your study group, great. If you don't, it shouldn't matter. The outcome has to be achieved. So a different kind of thinking, and then learnings from all different people around you, different kinds of backgrounds, like, like armed forces people, very different kind of background, like, and like, chef has his own stories about what happens in the kitchen, like, kitchens of India. So yeah, so it was like that. Then started the Tech Mahindra journey. So then I got college placements. I sort of went to Tech Mahindra. So out of the roles over there which were being offered, I think Tech Mahindra I found interesting because it was like an XO role, where I would be executive of, officer to like a senior leader. And then I got mapped to the CTO at the time, and working with him, I got to like also understand many things about how to run a company at scale, 1 lakh people, multiple offices across the country, super complex, like, and you have to somehow like, be employee centric and also standardize, right? And because you can't otherwise run such a system, and how revenue works, billing rates, and I think Tech Mahindra was like, so something I learned this super valuable lesson at Tech Mahindra, right? Which somehow I had never picked up throughout my entire life. And the super valuable lesson was this, that see, in IT services, right, revenue accrual or revenue depends on billing hours, right? So per hour, you need to have higher billing, right? So somehow you need to figure out that, or so for example, if you did like some basic Java work, and all the billing hours would be low because that's the competitive landscape. If you did like AI or like, let's say, machine learning or analytics, the billing rate is high. So I was doing all these calculations and, trying to figure out what the billing rate should be, what the revenue should be. There were some business units who were not doing so well. So we're trying to figure that out. And then I realized, yaar, mera billing rate क्या है? ये सब तो सही है, लेकिन मैंने फिर बंद किया लैपटॉप and मैं देखने लगा कि भाई मेरा क्या है ना, realized rock bottom billing rate, like just the worst, like, and this is kind of what became now my metric for success. I didn't care about what my designation was, what level I'm working, whether I am like supreme leader, CEO, XO, whatever. Like, I just focused on one thing. Like, for me, if my billing rate is increasing, that means my skills are becoming more valuable with time. That my time is basically becoming more and more valuable. Then that means I'm moving up in life.
Right.
If it's not, it's not. And designation has no sort of meaning in this kind of thinking. Right. So then I decided ki bhai, this is going to be my North Star metric. With time, am I learning? So then you start to realize, right? Then you need to learn new skills, because Excel sheet mein samne hai, data analytics wale ko zyada paisa mil raha hai. Right. So what are the skills you have to learn? Like, so then you start thinking about that. So then you start to measure yourself on that every hour, every time, every, like, let's say year on year, is your time becoming more valuable? Because if it is, that means you're moving up. If it's not, then it's not. So valuing, ability to value your time, and then, you obviously productivity, etc., became like my kind of guiding light in some sense. After that whole experience, right, of literally spending like year on year just calculating the hell out of all of these things and trying to figure out, how to like improve business, how to improve revenue, how to do different things. It was also incidentally this time when I discovered blockchain for the first time. So the CTO had commissioned me to look at all the different new technologies. Again, we were trying to figure out billing rate kaise, kahan pe bada hoga, right? What new skills can we bring to the table where we'll get more revenue? That's when I looked at machine learning, AI, etc. And then I came across the Bitcoin white paper. And I understood absolutely nothing. So I read it again, blank. I was like, yeah, मेरा IQ कम है क्या? Like, समझ में नहीं आ रहा यार. ये ledger है, hash बन रहा है, like क्या चल क्या रहा है यहाँ पे? And then I read it again. So I read it a couple more times, but I think what happened after that is that outside the technology and blockchain, ledger, I think what really struck me was this idea of decentralization. And then that became like this, like kida in me, right? Ki bhai, like this is an entirely new way of thinking. What I realized, and all the corporate life and all the things I've done, this is something else, right? And I started thinking about it. Started talking to my friends about it, and I started like attending these blockchain events. Like 6 people would turn up, like like literally like 4 people. Like even at T-Hub, I remember very early days I used to go. There used to be like 8 people in the room.
Yeah,
right?
Prashant and me were one of them.
You guys were there. Right, so वहाँ पे like जाके but I made it a point. No, I will show up.
Right.
Let's see what's happening in the space. And this is when I started going down the rabbit hole, and then I like learned a lot about it. Then I remember we had this session where I had to pitch the CEO, and I pitched CB Gurnani that we should do blockchain. And from his face I could tell he has heard this pitch before. I think a few people had pitched him like this blockchain and all. So I could remember he was listening, and then he had this look on his face, and I could tell कि हाँ इसने पहले सुना है ये. And then in the next few months a blockchain business unit was also set up. And then I sort of became like a product manager there, whose job was to look at different types of blockchain products and how we could apply them to enterprise. So my journey actually didn't start with Ethereum. It started with Hyperledger and looking at these kind of use cases and all of this. And वो सारा private blockchain करके मेरा मतलब learning यही था कि ये पूरा scam है. ठीक है? Like ये this अपना ही database चला रहे हो, अपना ही node चल रहा है, message नहीं जा रहा है, फिर से भेज दो. How can you do this? It's a ledger. Like how can you be like transaction नहीं किया, चलो फिर से भेज दो. Like and then like so when I started developing the products and working with the tech, I realized that this is just total no-go, right? This is not what I read in that white paper. Also this crypto crash and all happened. So then I kind of also realized ki bhai dekho, like this whole crypto crash has happened, and obviously the feeling I had at the time is that we are too early. The tech is not ready. The concept is right? There's nothing wrong there. Tech is not ready. And then we sort of then I took a detour. I joined an AI company. Very fascinated by AI. I was also learning NumPy and some of those things at the time with working with Python. And then we were doing data labeling ops and tooling for self-driving vehicles. So again, I got like a really great grounding in AI, over a period of 18 months.
And this is all still at TechM.
This is a new company. So this company was called Playmint, Playmint.
Playmint.
So I left Tech Mahindra and I joined this AI company full time. Again, mostly business development, but then sort of learned a lot about the AI space, about self-driving vehicles, and like how self-driving vehicle in some sense is like the tier 1 of AI, right? Because you need to be all like near human like in your ability to take decisions on the fly quickly. So this is like a very interesting experience. And then I then of course the founders, I think at that time they had found a buyer for the company. They wanted to like they wanted to sort of exit. So then I also kind of left the company at the time, and that's when I got the call from Polygon. So that's how the Polygon story started.
It's such a if there's some things that stand out to me here is that now it makes sense how you made it in Polygon, because I've never heard this story before.
Right.
Like I think
that's brilliant. That's brilliant.
Of all the
like
times
a
that
workshop.
I know. I know. And you know what?
So strange, right? Like how all those things just come together somehow. Like that's what I like. Sometimes I feel it was very strange. Yeah.
Like you sort out Polygon or Polygon sort out you?
So I was standing actually in the supermarket line, okay, and there was a long line. I don't know what was up with the supermarket that day. I think it was a weekend or something, and I was getting bored, So I got this call from this unknown number, and normally I wouldn't pick up, like, credit card khareedna hai or whatever. I picked up the phone, so then I got a call and saying that we want you to join our team and all as a blockchain researcher. So I was like, acha, but research and all. I was like, I don't know, are there any other roles? Like, is there something else? Like, honestly, I was bored. I won't even ask that. Like, but I was just standing in the line. They were like, okay, let me just call you back. Then she said the founder wants to speak to you. So I said, okay. So that was then my first call with Sandeep. And what I also did is that prior to this call, because it was a force of habit, like I would read about the industry. Like, so this is one thing I've always observed. It didn't matter if the company was big, small, whatever. If I'm getting into a call with someone, like I'm going to read before I get into the call. So I read about what's happening in Ethereum, scaling problems. I had seen those before, like, you know, when I was, I remember the CryptoKitties episode, I was also trying to figure out CryptoKitties at the time. I realized that, you know, scaling is a problem. And that's, I remember that was also the time when I felt the tech is not ready. So then these guys were coming up with a solution, and then I read about how the solution worked, etc. So I got a sense, okay, there's something interesting. Like I said, there is PMF here. So this is a genuine problem being solved. How they are solving, what they're solving, I still didn't know. I said seems to be some sense of PMF here. I spoke to Sandeep. Then the conversation, you know, went well. And, you know, I mean, if people, you know, Sandeep's also a master salesman. Like, you know, whatever you say, right? उसने मेरे को खतरनाक बेचा ये वो ऐसे. Very interesting sound कर रहा है भाई. And it was interesting because at the time I had another offer from another great company in the AI space, which has now raised multiple rounds and all. It was a good offer, frankly speaking. And then I had this call with Sandeep. Then I spoke to JD. I spoke to Anurag. There were 3 founders at the time. And then it was time to take a decision. So then, you know, I was trying to figure out, hey, should I take this AI option funded company, etc. and all, or should I join these guys? You know, जो कुछ भी बोल रहे phone पे, like, you know. Then you know, I was sitting with my wife. I remember we were just having tea in the evening, and I was asking her and all. And then she said, "Ki they offer ठीक है, funded company and all, but where do you think you'll have the most fun? मजा कहाँ पे आएगा?" I said, honest answer is I'm going to have more fun with these guys. Like, you know, this ragtag bunch is going to be way more fun than again going and, you know, sales, tech and doing that thing. Then she said, then you should do that, right? Like focus on, you know, what you would enjoy more. And if you enjoy, like, you know, and she said, like, I've seen how you are. If you enjoy it, you'll do really well. So I said, ठीक है, risk लेते हैं यार. Like, you know, जो भी है. And then that's how it kind of started. And yeah, I mean, man, I enjoyed it a lot. Like, it was super pressure, like a lot of stress, crazy time, but it was so much fun. Like, I think the initial time we had to fight the world was just the best time. Yeah.
No, I feel like a lot of who you are today. I mean, now in the context of all the experience that you've shared, from Hema Malini selling RO purifiers right up to your experiences with doing sales and AI and ISB. Now it makes sense as to why, you know, this worked out. But now you're at Mantle, and Prash has a very deep interest in modular blockchains. So he has some questions for you. Right. Maybe we should get into the hardcore stuff.
Sure, definitely. For a bit. So I'll just quickly cover. So Mantle. So there are like 3 things I want to cover here. So number one, what is Mantle, right? So Mantle is a layer 2 blockchain, which is incubated by BitDAO. So BitDAO's entire treasury is on Ethereum, so very Ethereum aligned. Want to follow the path of decentralized and, you know, build an open blockchain. So this is kind of our approach. It just made sense to go with the roll-up design. The current testnet is already out. It's an optimistic roll-up testnet, but we are actively researching ZK rollups and trying to see if it makes sense for us to go to ZK rollup when our mainnet rolls out, which is something we're planning for end of Q2, Q3. Like that's kind of the time frame we have in mind. So this is what the blockchain is. Now, what's interesting about this construct is that on the technical side, we've gone to the modular architecture, something Vitalik has also talked about, a lot of like, you know, like there's a lot of conversations. It's been done to death about, you know, monolithic versus like modular blockchains. But I think over and above in the last year also, we've seen monolithic designs face downtimes, issues with, you know, improving that design. So modular design is just essentially think of it like a test bed where you can continuously iterate and improve the design, right? So if you have, for example, transaction processing, transaction finality, and data availability as separate layers, you can swap those out. And you can continue to improve that test bed without having to do hard, like, you know, major hard forks or a lot of testing. So this is just what made sense for us, that, you know, and on data availability also, we've gone a little ahead of the curve here that, you know, we're working with EigenLayer. EigenLayer's data availability solution is also interesting. It's still an alpha, but we integrated it because we wanted to, you know, give developers that access and see what could be done there. On the fraud proof side, we're working with Specular and with some other kinds of fraud proofs to see what innovation can come there. And for the transaction processing chain side, we've used the optimism's kind of stack there. And so this is with respect to what the chain is. Again, being incubated by BitDAO has its own advantages. So chains have to start typically from zero, do ICOs, etc. I'm backed by BitDAO, which is the biggest DAO in the Web3 space. The token we're going to use for gas fees is the Bit token, which is already very liquid, already there on all major exchanges. BitDAO's got a big community. It's also backed by Bybit, which has multiple million users. We also have Mirana Ventures. The Mirana Ventures is the venture arm of Bybit, which is LP in almost all the other big funds, you know, like Animoca, Play Ventures, Spartan. big ecosystem there. All the companies which BitDAO is invested in, Game7, ZKDAO, EduDAO, big ecosystem there. Yeehaw Games, etc. There are like a bunch of other companies as well. So if you look at this ecosystem, there's already like a very liquid token, which is fully listed, huge community of token holders and associated community. So like for me with Mantle, what's interesting for us is that we don't have to start from zero. We already have a jumping off point where we're already at a certain level. Like a lot of problems are solved. Second thing is that we can offer like, technology aside, and technology being exciting aside, also we can offer like projects all the way to go from all the way from 0 to 100, right? Which is start with like a product, get grants, get investment, and then high potential projects go all the way to listing, right? And this is something which like many ecosystems, like in fact most cannot offer this kind of a roadmap, right? On day zero, you have adoption because the community is there. So this is as far as like Mantle is concerned, and the philosophy behind Mantle. I've talked about this before, but like if you look at the entire blockchain space, if I were to just quickly cover it in 4-5 minutes, if you look at the entire blockchain space, you will see that every blockchain fundamentally is trying to do the same thing, right? So every blockchain is trying to build technology, like which is again very expensive to build technology. You need big tech teams, research. Not everything you research will work out. So iterations, testing. So this is your tech spend, right? And then every blockchain is also trying to build the biggest ecosystem, big business teams, marketing, incentive mechanisms. So you've got two very expensive problems, right? Both are orthogonal in nature, by the way. So it's not like technology and business operate in very different ways, even so more so in Web3. And two very expensive problems and only one treasury to pay for all of this, right? And what that means actually is that if you just look at the two outliers of adoption in let's say the last bull cycle, Solana and Polygon, right? Huge adoption. The Sol token and the Matic token, if you look at all of their vesting, etc., and you can check this on chain as well, you will see that the float of the token is in between 90 to 95%. In one bull cycle, you spent all your money, right? And it's not your fault. Also, it's not the blockchain's fault because they're trying to solve everything at once, right? And interestingly, every blockchain wants to solve everything at once, right? And the outcome here is that everybody's going to end up burning their treasury. So like I've been playing like with this idea in my head for about a year, where I realized that this is extremely capitally wasteful. It's not an efficient model for ecosystem growth. So at Mantle, what we want to do is that we want to use our treasury to focus purely on ecosystem building and go closer and closer to the user. We will work with a tech partner, right? And this tech partner could be Arbitrum, Optimism, Polygon, ZK Sync. So we're talking to everybody right now. And essentially what we do is that we will use their technology with their blessing. And whatever gas fees I generate, I will remit it back to this party, right? Thereby, either to their provers, sequencers, validators, whatever have you. So there's a clear value accrual from me. And what this means is that the infrastructure player now uses their treasury to focus purely on infrastructure. And continuously building the best chain, provers, sequencers, consensus mechanisms, client infrastructure, while we focus more and more towards the user. So we go closer to the user, the infrastructure player goes closer to infrastructure. And this collaborative model, right, where we work together, where instead of only one treasury, now you have two treasuries, each focused on solving a particular problem. Like this is the way ahead in Web3. This is going to be the efficient model of solving for ecosystem and technology at the same time without trying to solve everything at once and then burning through your treasury. And the advantage of me is that the float of my token is about 9 to 10%. Like 90% is with, and I've got a $2 billion sitting in the DAO. So I've got enough money for me to last me the decade of business development and do all those deals and incentives. But I can only do this if I work with a partner who ensures that I have the best technology at any given moment of time. Right? So this is the model I want to run with. I've discussed it with all the founders. Everybody seems to find merit in this idea that, okay, this is interesting because, and this idea also has its genesis in the way Ethereum operates. This is exactly how Ethereum operates, by the way. It's not like some new idea. I actually learned it from looking at Ethereum. So if you look at Ethereum basically built an ecosystem. Then there were scalability problems, right? So then what happened is now there is an infrastructure layer on top of that, right? So what that means is Ethereum is now finality. There is another infrastructure layer on top of Ethereum. So today, who is doing business development for Ethereum? It is Optimism, Arbitrum, Polygon. Ethereum is not doing that. Ethereum is focused purely on infrastructure. And their, continuous roadmap. So what I'm telling these companies is Ethereum is here, finality layer. You are here. Now you focus on infrastructure. I will be on top. Understand? I will be the layer on top and I will do business development for you. While you focus now on building the best infrastructure. This is Ethereum's model.
So in a way, if I project is 5 years down, right? Then you guys at Mantle are the closest to the user, while
Yes.
you have like this toolkit of all these other
Yes.
layer 2s and their infra, right?
Yes.
Which, and also these other data availability layers that are coming up.
Yes.
So you
Yes.
can kind of like use them to kind of, fit within what the users need, right? And then the ultimate, of course,
Exactly.
settlement happens on Ethereum then.
Exactly, right? Because in the last bull cycle, I saw like billions of dollars are spent, and the number of users we have on chain is still in the single digit millions, right? Extremely wasteful, right? And if we gave all this money to a Web2, like let's say some like fintech company, they would have at least 100 million users. This is not tenable, right? So we need to ensure that in the next cycle we get to 100 million users, and this can only happen if we efficiently use capital and everybody in the system is focused on particular problems, and especially user focused problems. Because the thing with user focused problem is it's not sexy, right? Nobody wants to like talk about onboarding, fiat. I was like, ZK batao, like like tell us what's happening there, polynomial maths, kya baat hai, like so it's like that kind of like nobody wants to work on these unsexy problems, but it is these unsexy problems which will bring us like mass adoption. Somebody has to do this, right? So for me, I've made a conscious decision to not get involved with crypto Twitter, right? Because I've seen this with too many founders. You start tracking crypto Twitter, then that becomes your life. Then you start thinking, "Haan, yehi satya hai." Like like this is the truth. Like narrative wars, flaming each
Man,
other.
welcome to the club. I struggle with crypto Twitter.
Right. So constantly यही चल रहा है, लोग एक दूसरे को गाली दे रहे हैं, like तेरा नहीं चलता, तू बेकार है, this community, that community. I'm like, bro, like we need to move past this.
Correct.
We need to increase
100%
the
agree.
size of the pie, and there is this entire world out there of like hundreds of millions and billions of people who don't give two shits about you. And all of this thing which you made your world. So I'm going to like extricate myself from this. I will in fact tell the infrastructure players, tum ye sab karo. Like I will retweet. Like I will like and retweet. You do all this. But I'm going to now only focus on talking to users and companies and Web2 companies and ask them, ki, sir, batao, kya solve karna hai? And they'll be like, dekho, like, we need this solved. I'm like, okay, that's my problem statement now.
And are you guys also, so technically, I mean, in my head, if I'm kind of looking across the stack, right, then you have execution, data availability, consensus, and settlement, right? So today, Optimism and Arbitrum do all of these things except for the settlement on Ethereum, right? Now you are kind of like abstracting it away to an extent, and then you're saying, okay, are you still at the execution level, or are you even below that? So are you more like an L3 at that point?
I wouldn't necessarily say we're an L3 because the settlement will still happen on Ethereum. Right? If I have to talk to like big enterprises and these kind of companies, I need the settlement on Ethereum. So it would not be an L3. Although I would say that over a period of time, let's say like once even the ZK model takes off and chains become like, let's say have more adoption, it's possible that like more chains may prefer to build L3s. Right? Companies may want to build L3s. But for me, the design we want to go with is L2. It offers higher security. And like I said, with data availability, we can offset that cost. Right? So why do people go to L3? It's even faster and inexpensive, right? So if you do that same thing on L2 with data availability, then you kind of achieve the same outcome.
Got it.
So
Got it.
Kind
okay.
of the thing. Yeah.
And so and you said you guys are building optimistic rollups, right? So technically you're building your own stack as well, but you're not just dependent on that. You can use the stack of other L2s as well for the users.
So we are currently have built our own stack, and we bought some other innovations also, like multi-party computation to like speed up the 7-day exit period. So there's a 7-day exit period. There's not many ways around that. But what we decided is that when sequences produce like a state root, right, which has to go into L1. Now in multi-party computation, there is another set of MPC nodes, like independent nodes, right, whose job is to recreate the state root and then compare that is the state root created by this party and this party the same. And if it is, then it goes to L1. And what that means is that, your exit period now, instead of 7 days, could become 3 days or even 1 day. So there's some innovations there. But like I said, right, like the problem with this kind of thinking also is that you get trapped into continuously managing this tech stack, and then you have to manage it forever. See, these blockchains have to outlive us. Like that's the North Star we should like think, like that's how we should think. This technology has to outlive us. And when you start thinking with that time horizon, then you need to have a model which will stand the test of time. Right? ऐसे नहीं अभी ये चलेगा ऐसा. And why I would say I'm able to uniquely do this at Mantle is because I'm funded by a DAO. My money comes from the DAO. I don't have VC bag holders, breathing down my neck, asking me, when is a token going to pump? I don't have that pressure on me. When BitDAO raised money in Bit token, all that money is already there in the market. I think all the VCs already exited or whatever. There's no vesting, nothing is remaining. So jo hai, right? And this allows me to think more long term, maybe compared to some of the others who, for no fault of theirs, but because they've raised so much VC funding, they have this pressure. They have this pressure.
Yeah.
Like, I luckily don't, and I can now build more builder centric and less, let's say, or rather, I would say cycle agnostic and more builder centric.
Got it. I mean, for me, how do you make chains and the developer experience more usable has been seems to be the story around everything from what the initial promise of a layer 2 was, or what a supernet is, or what a subnet is. Now L3 is a conversation. My question is like, okay, is this just one more trend from a modularity standpoint that you're kind of looking at? Or do you really think that there is something that modular architecture gives you over the existing L2 and app chain stuff that already exists?
I think like I was saying, right? So with supernet, subnets and all, we've seen like this app chain kind of approach take off, right? And it's very, like, just to explain app chains, right? It's very similar to cloud computing, where like initially when cloud computing started, there were like 50 vendors, right? And over a period of time, over the last 15 years, eventually the entire community is coalesced into 3, right? Where there's AWS, Azure, GCP, and then there's a big drop, right? To where, so I feel there'll be an explosion of chains, and then at some level of consolidation of chains where we will have like 3-4 big ecosystems, or maybe a little more than that, but that's essentially what I feel is the future state, right? So centralized compute and decentralized compute will have a similar, in some sense, a similar kind of outcome in some sense. Coming to what you brought up about modular chains, right? So like I said, modularity basically is allows you to create a test bed where there is infinite potential for improvement, right? You can swap out features, right? So like now, for example, we're talking about data availability with EigenLayer. I can use multiple data availability layers and then let the DApp, let's say, decide where you want to dump data, or the chain operators. And and then what will happen is there will be then this arms race at the data availability side of people who offer incentives so that you use their data availability. Similarly, on the fraud proof prover side, there will be multiple fraud proofs and provers of different kinds, right? And then there'll be an arms race there. Mera prover use karo, main faster hu, I'll give you like this, I don't know, token, whatever. Like, this prove to earn model, I'm sure at some point will come. Like,
no, stop.
Like,
no.
So entirely new arms race happening there, right? And then there'll be entirely new arms race for the transaction engine. Right. And where there are, again, there've been so many new innovations. Like I think Aptos had this parallel processing construct, right? Where you sort of do transaction in parallel, and then you use a DAG-like consensus, or decentralized acyclic graph type consensus. So that consensus is faster, right? Typically what you do, you like transaction, like, so when you look at transactions, consensus and processing is kind of intertwined in some sense, where you do like, you do processing, then you wait for consensus, etc. Here they're saying do all the processing in parallel, and then you use the consensus, keep it separate, and do it in a construct which is very efficient. And DAGs are very efficient when it comes to consensus. Maybe not much else, but consensus makes king. So you, by combining this, so you have like innovations happening at the chain level as well. There is also like, like if you want to look into consensus mechanisms, there's this bull shark narwhal type of consensus, which I think now even Tendermint is going to take up. So there are like even of chain infrastructure essentially. So then you've got these 3 layers where there's all of this happening. But finality, I still feel Ethereum is going to become the best finality layer, because Ethereum is also going through its own evolution of becoming more efficient, better, etc. So
thanks for that context on Mantle, and I think the conversation around treasuries doing one thing well as opposed to trying to do multiple things is definitely an experiment that I perhaps want to see how it pans out. So along those lines, does Mantle have India plans, and what does that look like?
I think today, I don't think there's anybody in the world who doesn't have an India plan. It's now becoming the most.
I can show you a few.
Like,
there are
really?
People
man, those are short those tokens. Like, but I would just say that, of course,
one sec, before you move forward, not financial advice, guys. Don't take shorting long.
Never do this. Like,
like Akshay BD was on the podcast last week, and he comes on the podcast and says, everything I'm going to talk about is about Solana, the tech. Solana, the token, I don't even know why you guys will buy it. Our tokenomics sucks. We don't.
No,
Hey, technically, that also we should say is not financial advice, you know.
He should put that on Twitter,
I
right?
know.
Like if he feels that way, he won't do that. But coming back to like I would just say NFA, of course. I mean, completely NFA there, and I would want people to approach this podcast as builders and as ecosystem sort of players versus speculators. But like we were talking about um, uh, like ecosystem building and what plans we have for India right now. Of course, India again has numerous advantages, huge developer market, like and the best thing about Web3 is that it's global in nature. It doesn't matter where you're sitting, which country, whatever have you. So for Mantle, of course, we've started like our like sort of India plans like in a very sort of structured, slow manner. So number one would be like talking to hackathon players like Devfolio, etc., and getting a sense and getting to know the developers better, getting feedback from them. See, our testnet is out, right? So developer feedback for us is like the most important thing, so that we can make we can come up with new types of technology. And whatever partner we work with, we will also contribute to their code base. It's not as if you're just going to be running the chain. We have a research team, we have a tech team, so that's important for us. We're also talking to several funds who are investing in India and trying to get a sense of which way the money is flowing, where are they taking risks, where are they not doing it. So it gives you a sense of how you need to develop the market as well. So for example, if you get feedback saying that I'm not seeing a lot of like interesting DeFi projects, so that means we need to do education there. We need to figure out how we can get builders to that point. So this is kind of how we are approaching the market, where it's more from a learning perspective and figuring out how we can help the ecosystem versus कि मेरे को developer चाहिए कितना $, लगेगा. Like I don't think that's like a long term like way of thinking about anything. And which is where like what I feel is you talk to builders, you get a
why I'm laughing, right?
I mean, why is that?
Just
No, I'm curious about that. Yeah.
No, we'll not talk about it. But inadvertent shots
After the recording.
Inadvertent shots fired based on that.
But yeah, like I would say, like instead of thinking like the market that way, like getting a sense of who's building what is getting built, what is not getting built, so that we can, that's the education we need to bring to the market. And again, creating like great incentive mechanisms for developers to deploy to and learn more and to interact with our ecosystem. And like I said, why are we taking this approach? Because we have deigned to be closer to the user. Like that's the function, right? So if you're not going to sit there and talk to people and listen, then this model is going to fall apart. So that's why I said that it's super important to not just know what developers are building and what they want to build, but also what's not being built.
Right.
You understand? And from there we can sort of start to figure out, okay, this is how we need to develop a market. So when I look at markets, I want to develop them. I don't want to profit off them, because I don't think that's how Web3 works in the first place.
True.
So,
and we're still early.
So for every region, we're going to take this kind of an approach. Yeah.
Oh,
and where are you guys on the roadmap today on Mantle across the journey? You said testnet is out, right? So
yeah, testnet
anything else you can share?
Yeah, so what I can say is that the testnet is out, so data availability is integrated. We'll be opening up the data availability endpoint so that people can view and sort of interact with that data. We will then also will have fraud proofs possibly in a couple of months. So that will be our contribution to the optimistic code base. And then on the technology side, like I said, we're talking to several tech stack providers, and we'll have some clarity there as well, right? So there's like some consensus internally that maybe we should go full ZK rollup, right? But then all the opcodes need to be there, all the pre-compiles need to be there. It has to make sense from a gas fees perspective, because again, being developer and user centric means we need to solve these problems. Like I can't go and be like cool technology, like we have to solve problems. So we have an internal research team which is now putting together the data, trying to recreate all these results with other blockchains. And then once that decision is made, we will then sort of go ahead and maybe do like a formal announcement of this partnership, and then start, like I said, developing the markets and then sort of seeing what's getting built, what's not getting built, and then try to guide developers and builders and companies towards that outcome.
Yep. And you guys have a mainnet launch timeline in mind?
So mainnet, we're thinking about it in Q2, like end of Q2 or Q3. We want to take our time with this decision. And so that's kind of how it is. But I mean, it's just 2-3 months away. It's not like a whole lot of time. But what we want to do in this period is that we want to have like a huge number of hackathons. Like I said, it's a huge opportunity for us to obviously build the Mantle brand, but like I said, gain valuable feedback from the market as well. Build a developer community and start listening to them. That what is not being built, what is difficult, what is not, and then I think that's when we can develop a really successful model of helping the ecosystem and building value.
I was going to ask you to give us some alpha on who that mystery infrastructure project may be that you.
Man, it's like you have to separate the marketing from the reality, right? Like
Yeah.
our approach isn't that, show us some deck. Oh, these are your numbers. Like, this is not what we're doing. We're saying, give us your code, buddy. And then we will run the same thing. We will recreate
Right.
exactly what you've written in your blog post.
Right.
Yeah.
And then if the numbers match, then it makes sense.
Got it.
So that's why it's taking time, right? And the other most important thing, right? Being community owned and community governed chain, that I can't just take this decision and be like, okay, community, we're doing this. Like, there's a reason for this report, because once this report is ready, we will put it on the forum. And then we will ask the community, guys, these are our findings. Like, on the basis of these findings, we feel this partner is the best, vote on this. Like, I want to set this precedent from day zero, that the community is going to be extremely involved in the future and sort of the build out of Mantle as a chain in all of these critical decisions, right? Obviously, day-to-day management we'll manage, but if there is a critical decision which defines our future, I think the community should have a say. In fact, they should be the arbiters of this, like, and I eventually become an instrument of the community in some sense. So that's kind of
just a follow up on that, Arjun. So you did mention the transaction fees on Mantle will be paid using bit token, right?
Yes,
so
yes.
technically, this governance comes from bit token in a way,
Bit
right?
itself.
Over a period
Yes,
of time.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Right. So
It's
this
very
gives us
interesting.
interesting utility, where utility of the bit token is built very heavily on the application level in all the DeFi, NFT, gaming, etc. Also at the infrastructure level, because I will have bit staking on the data availability side, possibly on the prover side as well, depending on how we have the setup. And then it's also used for governance. And so there's multiple utility for this token, and that means like a large degree of value accrual, which then means like a stronger treasury, which means that we can like really supervise our plans. So the way I explain it is that it's actually blockchain building in reverse, right? So you have Ethereum fully centralized Ethereum, decentralized over a period of time, where today there is voting on the outcome, right? We are already there.
Right.
We are already decentralized. Now I will use the community sort of guidance to now build a chain. I feel that this is a better approach, because technology scales vertically, but DAOs scale horizontally. You see, DAOs become stronger with the size of the community. So DAOs, because they scale horizontally, are especially well suited to ecosystem building, because that's what ecosystem building is. Ecosystem building is a breadth problem, right? Which eventually leads to depth, right? While so that's kind of why I want to use this approach. It's not so much for decentralization's sake that I want to show up centralized community voting karenge. It's not that. It's because this construct is the best construct to build an ecosystem.
Yeah,
got it.
And that is why we have to start this from day zero. So
very, very interesting tech. Plus, just a corollary of this entire token discussion, right? Like usually you see an avalanche of dApps getting built and users doing transaction on like things like, say, for example, Arbitrum today in anticipation of like a future airdrop, right? In your case, that will not be the case. However, because you're already decentralized, right? So there can be like a governance mandate that can be created in terms of like how can our first set of users be rewarded, right?
So there are like interesting ways. Like, so now I have to having to study governance also, right? And like look at, because I had not really considered this, because I mean, all the blockchain ecosystems prevalent at the time are super centralized, right? Like there are a few people make decisions and that's it. Here, it's an entirely different ballgame. So I'm having to now study and see how do we like, create nimbler decision making. Like, should we do something like synthetics, like have like a central committee? Should we have multiple central committees, like a tech committee and an ecosystem committee? And then am I going to end up with committee hell, or like what's going to happen? Like, so these are also interesting discussions, which we're having internally on what the governance should be, where it's nimbler, effective, and we're able to, essentially really support the ecosystem.
And can you guys also support things like supernets and subnets as well?
So that's an interesting question. So that's an interesting question. It is very possible that at Mantle, if we build a big ecosystem, then eventually people may use our chain as an L3, because we will be, our finality rests on Ethereum. I think there's a very high chance of that happening, considering the size of our ecosystem already, which will only grow over time. Like one of the ways I was thinking was that, like see, at BitDAO, we've got a lot of liquidity and a big community, right? So think of it this way. Like, so I'll give you an example. Let's say you're a DAO, right? Or let's say, and you want to build a DeFi project. Let's say you're like an Aave DAO or something like this. Like, what you can do is if you want to, let's say, build your own chain or something, all you got to do is pledge certain amount of your gas fees or rather DeFi fees to the DAO, right? And in return, DAO gives you liquidity provisioning, listing support, ecosystem support, marketing support. So this is kind of how I want to grow the power of the DAO and of this decentralization in the first place. So I'm going to encourage protocols to park certain percentage of the revenue or certain percentage of fees in case of a chain, and you continue to park it with the DAO. The DAO becomes stronger, and in return, the DAO then gives you all of these other advantages. So now you've got all the bit stakers who are doing decision making, and they're like, you know what, we should support this other chain, because then all the gas fees coming from this chain will then, you know, be distributed to us, and then we will mobilize all our liquidity ecosystem, etc., to make that successful. So L3 model for me would actually be really successful, because with the DAO it just works out really well. And this is the power of the flexibility of a DAO, where, you know, you can do these kind of things which in a centralized way would just look like scammy. Right. So that's kind of how I see it. I mean, that's like a future thing, but yeah, it's something which the model, I think, something which already we can solve even today.
Understood.
Mandatory wearing ties to managing a decentralized community on a forum. What a journey, Arjun.
Right. I mean, I'm sitting in my boxers, you know, I'm like wondering कि यार ये
Aren't we all?
लोग वोट क्यों नहीं कर रहे हैं यार, मतलब मुझे काम करना है भाई, कर दो वोट, like, you know. So like these are the problems with governance, right? How do you like do it? It's not going to be easy, I'll tell you that much. But
Yes.
like, I think, you know, the onus is then on me and the team to, you know, build in an engaging community, right? Who sort of does this. So I don't blame the community. I just blame us that we have to become more and more engaging. And I think if we can do that, then great things will happen. Like it should be like
I mean, the way
home
you the way you describe it, it's fairly unique in terms of what's happening in the ecosystem today. So that's just raised so many more questions. I'm super conscious of the time, but it's very interesting. I'll probably hit you up separately.
No, of course, man. Like, and in fact, I want to talk about this in ETH Denver, this new model of ecosystem building, because I think I don't just want us to do it. I want every pool of liquidity, whether it's a DAO or a protocol, to start doing this instead of being like, "Hum chain banayenge, we'll build a team." Like, no, who's our tech partner? Because then you use resources efficiently, and that's when, you know, Web3 as a whole succeeds. All of us succeed, right? So that's super important. So I want this model to now become the driving model behind, you know, the next sort of phase of growth. So
Speaking of ETH Denver, we, you know, some interesting things on the
is it
horizon.
now?
We'll talk about, hopefully by the time this podcast is out, something we may have made some interesting announcements. Arjun, it's been quite a while since we were chatting. I didn't even know the time passed by. But,
I kind of suddenly realized,
but there is one last question that we want to ask you.
Sure.
You know, you sold RO purifiers to you know, Tambaku chewing Delhi uncles. Done Oracle sales stuff, and then also done Polygon sales stuff, and now, you know, governing a community. What would you say when it comes to at least Web3 stuff is the hardest sale that you've done? And tell us that story.
Man, hardest sale I've ever done. All my sales have been so hard, you know. I wish I would, like, you know, give you one example and be like, and the rest was easy. But that's somehow not been my life. But I think, you know, if I were to look back, I think the times at Oracle were some of the hardest times, right? Because I was doing sales for the first time. I didn't like understand how to communicate value, etc. There were days I just wanted to, like, you know, there were some really tough days when, you know, I wanted to just give up. And, you know, and I think what really helped me was, like, you know, the people around me who saw that, you know, I was struggling to cope and, you know, helped me. Like I said, I was in a team of seasoned guys. So they've been through it before. So I think those were the toughest days. I think if I were to talk about Web3, definitely I would say dealing with enterprise companies is a very interesting kind of challenge, right? Equal parts exciting, but equal parts just you cannot believe, like, some of the things you have to hear, and then you have to wonder, these companies are at the, you know, spear, like the tip of the spear of technology, and like they're saying such, you know, it kind of boggles your mind, you know. But that being said, like, I think some of the conversations we had, like, around a meta were, like, you know, especially difficult, right? And here is actually, I would actually want to compliment the meta team, because like the kind of due diligence these guys did on technology, on our structure, on operations, you know, it was so deep and so brutal that we ended up learning 5-10 different things about our own company, which nobody had even considered, like, you know. So like tech stack was doing all this, and in some calls Sandeep was like, oh, that's how it works, huh? Oh shit. and you know, and in the company structure also wise, you know, like they bought in PwC, they had entirely different set of questions, and then we realized, yeah, we could structure this better actually, now that we think about it, you know. And so I think that meta experience was like really tough. I think for Meta is also a big decision. See, these guys are not your grant kind of, like sales, right? These people don't need your money, right? In fact, they're the ones putting their necks on the line for you by choosing you as a tech partner, right? So it's more riding on them than it is riding on you, which is kind of where I kind of started to learn these things. So I think the Meta experience was especially difficult, since every blockchain in the world was pitching these guys hard on using their technology, but was able to fight through it to this time. And then I remember, like, this is so interesting, right? So I'll tell you how it happened towards the end, right? So this whole period where I had talked to like so many people in Meta, built that momentum. I realized that Meta is a very engineering driven company. So I used to speak to so many engineers in Meta, try to understand how they're solving, what are the problems, what is the level of scale. And then eventually got to the point where people were convinced that, yeah, this is good tech. And then, so what happened is, so these guys got me on a call. Okay. So they're like, Arjun, we need to get on a call and just kindly get Sandeep also. So I said, okay. So I set up the call. Unfortunately, Sandeep couldn't make it for some reason. I think it was like, he was with family or something like that. So they came on the call. So they were like, is Sandeep joining? So I was like, I'm sorry, you can't make it today. Then he's like, oh, okay, let's reschedule the call. And I was like, shit, did something go wrong? Like, I was like, no, you guys can tell me, they're like, no, I think it's best if we do it when both of you are there. So I was like, oh shit, like, this is going to be that call, right? Where, thanks, but no thanks, like, kind of call. And I was trying to continuously think, man, the due diligence, everything went well. We covered all the questions, documentation, did something happen during the PwC audit? Which wallet did we, like, this, all the time I'm like, continuously stressed out, right? Next 3 days, stressed like crazy. Then this was a Friday. So we again got on the call. This time I told Sandeep, you better be on that damn call. Like, I'll come to your house, like, and you know, I want to be pretty. So then he's like, yeah, man, yeah, Meta, I'll be there on the call. Like, that's what he said last time, but I'm praying to God. He's like, yeah. So anyway, so then we had this call, and then we got into the call. They're like, okay, so guys, we wanted to let you guys know. I was like, here it comes, that we have chosen Polygon to work with us on, we're like, oh, like, and these guys were also playing with us, right? I think they were just messing with us. They all had a serious face, and then they all started, laughing, smiling, or whatever. So, and I was like, wow, like, thank God, this is going to be, this will change the face of the company in some sense. And and Sandeep was trying to keep it cool, right? But I could see on his face that he was totally like losing it inside, right? So and he's like, oh, okay, yeah, good. I'm very happy, like this is good. I'm like, I'm just thinking of how we can support strategic. Something he tried, some nonsense he tried saying, okay, and I was like, okay, we need to like not spoil this moment, like, and then the call happened, and then the call ended up, yes, like, this is
nice.
This is,
I can imagine the exuberance you guys must have had
so
at that time.
that was something which was crazy. And then we realized that, when a company, like, we started so humbly, so small, right? Raghu and all of you guys know, you were there when all of this happened, to the point where, one of the biggest companies and the most reputed brands in the world chooses you. I mean, it's something which gives you a lot of confidence. And
it was well before that, when we were doing that leap accelerator. You remember the VCs like fighting to be a part of it. That was like a defining moment for me. I was like, okay.
Yeah, that's when I realized we have, dude, like, you got power. Like, I didn't realize it. So I remember this very interesting. I don't know if Prashant, you know about this one. That I remember me and Raghu had this call, and Raghu was like, yeah, we're doing this accelerator, and we want, like, Polygon to be actively involved. You better have a good grant program for us. And I was like, yeah, that's true, but should we involve some VCs and something? He's like, man, I don't know. VCs will come. I can talk to a few people. I said, okay, let me also try. Dude, it's like some 8 or 10 VCs signed up. Like, literally, I told them we are doing this accelerator. Yes.
Done.
Thinking, like, I was thinking of some low number. I was like, let's do like at least 10K. Yes. When? Like, send us the email. I'm like, everybody said yes. And we kind of, it was like a new experience for me, right? Going from all the way to, sir, please.
So at that time, the only VC that I knew well was Prashant. So I called him up and he's like, bro, Woodstock, I'm putting it there. Okay. Then he's like, yeah, put it. Then before you know it, Prashant's like, how many VCs did you talk to, dude? Like, Leap Accelerator had one full line of VCs.
I'll talk to all the VCs. I thought one will agree. Everybody is like,
everybody agrees.
Like, we want to do this session and we want to talk to builders. And then, like, I remember, like, was it like Raghu or somebody from your team was like, dude, Arjun, we can't do so many sessions, man.
Yeah,
like,
it was me, bro.
It was
me.
Like, you know, I can't promise everybody a session. This is not happening. I'm like, man, we have to accommodate everybody, dude. Otherwise, they won't come the next time. So then, you know, we have to figure that out.
He's just being nice. He's like, bro, this is a good thing. Get all of them on a session, dude.
Yeah, I think I was
Good problem to have,
little more
definitely.
direct, you know, than how I'm putting it. But yeah, I mean, yeah, the showed, right? So I think this is when I started observing that, man, like, you know, we count for something.
Yeah.
Like, you know, because you're still used to
Oh yeah,
how it was. Yeah.
definitely.
So it was a good feeling. And so yeah.
And this was a blast. I really had a great time. I think I know you better now, man. Like even
I
though
feeling I've rambled on and wasted time. I apologize.
No, not at
No,
all.
man, no,
Not at all.
Not
I
at
think
all.
that anyway, I think generally our podcasts are like an hour and above. And I feel like people put it on when they're like doing their dishes or driving or walking or something like that. So the five people that listen to us do.
No, I'm sure.
So thanks so much for taking the time. And I know like Mantle is going big guns, and it's quite exciting to see all the new things that you're doing in your new avatar. And thanks for shedding some light and allowing us to get a sneak peek of what's next. So
absolutely, man.
Real
It's such
pleasure.
a pleasure. Yeah, being here and talking to you guys. Just, you guys are like more like my friends than anything else. So, it's always a blast. And yeah, we got big plans at Mantle, man. So, and yeah, stay tuned for the weeks to come for some really exciting announcements. So yeah, so thank you guys. Thanks.
Yeah, I can't sign off better than that. So Prash, do the honors.
No, I mean, this was great, man. To get deeper into the psyche of what made you who you are today, and how that contributed to the success of the various organizations you were part of, and wish you continued success with Mantle as well. And we all are behind you and looking forward to all the great things that you will unleash upon us in future.
Oh, thank you so much, Prashant. Thank you for your kind words, man. Thank you, guys.
Awesome.
Take care, man.
Ciao, friends.